Hey guys, how you doing? This is Halion. I'm gonna do something a little bit different for you today. I'm just gonna go over all the mirror buffs that you can get in the game here and try to help you out in case you're new to the game and you just have questions about where you should spend your darkness, which side of the mirror you should take between the green and the red side from Nyx there, and just kind of give you an idea of my thought process and what I think works well with which. So let's head on over here. We'll take a look at the mirror. And by the way, if you haven't checked out the stream, please do so. You're missing all sorts of quality content like this. Fuck this fucking game. See you later, Twitch chat. Get out of here. Wow. Talk about quality, guys, right? Okay. So anyway, let's get down to it. So I'm going to go through each of the mirror upgrades here one by one and just kind of go through what I think works best. Essentially. Now, there's going to be a lot of ifs and ands here, like which weapon you're using, which aspect you're using, but I guess I just want to give a general sense of what you're going to be looking for and why you'd be doing that, and also just kind of where to spend your first bits of darkness here, basically, okay? So we'll start off with that. Where would you put your darkness when you first start at the game? So number one is definitely going to be greater reflex. That +1 dash is so essential to just getting further in the game. It allows you to get away from enemies, get up close to enemies, get in and out quickly, get damage in on them, and just stay safe overall, I'd say. Number two is definitely going to be the Death Defiances. I know that it kind of costs a lot of darkness to get the second and third one, but you definitely need the one like very quickly, pretty much immediately after that. After that, these two I know are cheap, Shadow Presence and Chthonic Vitality, so it's not so bad to throw some darkness in there. But the next priorities are probably going to come pretty far down the list here. You are going to have to spend some keys to unlock them. So Thick Skin, more health, pretty straightforward. It's going to be something you're going to want early on in the game. But possibly more important is Privileged Status here. This is an extremely powerful upgrade if you don't know. So if you read the right side here, deal bonus damage versus foes afflicted by at least 2 status curse effects, plus 20% per rank, goes up to 2 ranks basically. So you can begin doing 40% more damage on enemies that have 2 curses applied to them. So if you don't know, a curse is a status effect caused by a god. So you have Dionysus' Hangover, you have Aphrodite's Weaken, you have Ares' Doom, you have Demeter's Chill, and then you have some of the basically the more like tier 2 types. So you have the Exposed debuff from Athena, you have Razor Shoals from Poseidon, you have Jolted from Zeus. These all require multiple boons to get to, though, for those gods. So if you're gonna do Privileged Status, you definitely want to think very hard about your boon choices, I'm gonna say. So you're going to want to consider which gods you're going to be looking for, maybe which god keepsakes you're going to use, maybe which door you pick in terms of gods, because you're going to want some easy ways to get curses on enemies to keep that damage to debuff up, basically. And those are the big ones when you're first starting out, I think, where you want to spend your darkness. So you really want a lot of defense, and then this is going to be your offense, basically, early on, okay? All right, so after that, let's just start at the top of the mirror here, and we're just going to go over... Are we going red or green side, basically? Are we going inverse or the normal side, as I might call it sometimes? I'm just going to default everything to the red side right now, and I'll explain to you which one I'm going to use and why I'd use it for each particular type of run, So first and foremost, Shadow Presence versus Fiery Presence. Shadow, you get backstab damage. Fiery Presence, you get a big bonus damage on the first hit. This is a tough one to choose from a lot of times, honestly. It does depend a little bit on the build. You wouldn't want to use this with something like the Rail that has small hits at the start, right? Fiery Presence, you wouldn't really want that. You'd want something that hits pretty hard on each swing. Talking about Arthur's Sword, maybe after that, maybe like if you're doing a spear special or something along those lines. You can kind of go either way for most builds. This is one of those ones that you can kind of swap back and forth. It's not going to make a huge difference in most of your runs. I'd say the majority of the time I'm using Shadow Presence here. Sometimes I put on Fiery for a little bit of fun, I guess you could call it. But honestly, this is one of those ones. It's not going to impact your run a lot, no matter which way you go, I think. Moving down, where we got Chthonic Vitality versus Dark Regeneration. This is one where I usually go 9 times out of 10 Dark Regeneration, I'm going to say. Getting that extra healing from Darkness is actually really nice, and especially if you're still farming Darkness, this incentivizes you to take chambers that reward more Darkness, you know? So this could be a good way of doing that, so you get a little bit of healing on top of just the Darkness itself for the long game, basically. Sonic Vitality isn't bad, but I just think overall that Dark Regeneration can be quite nice, honestly. After that, this one's very straightforward. You're pretty much always going to do Death Defiances. There are some very tight restrictions where you might want to use Stubborn Defiance, usually at extremely high heat. I'm talking like 40, 45 plus heat, you know, where you have a lot of lasting consequences on from the Pact. But that's a whole nother topic. You just go Death Defiances. Don't even consider Stubborn, I think, for now. Moving on to Greater Reflex versus Ruthless Reflex. So Ruthless, you get that big damage and dodge buff from it, which sounds really tempting, but unfortunately, just the 2 dashes are too powerful. 1 dash is very difficult. If you want to do it on a Lark, you can, you know, but I'd say you really just want those 2 dashes most of the time. You don't want to have to gamble on getting more from Hermes or anything like that. The big outlier here, I'd say, is if you have Gilgamesh Aspect unlocked, Ruthless Reflex is a beast. You try that out, because with the Gilgamesh Aspect, you get +2 dashes already anyway. So with Ruthless Reflex, you still have 3 dashes. It's nice. That's a nice one to try out. All right, Boiling Blood versus Abyssal Blood. So Boiling Blood, you get more damage from your attack and special with foes with cast stones inside of them. Abyssal Blood, instead, you take less damage and they move slower. So I'm gonna say that the majority of the time here, I mean, so unless you're gonna specifically go for a cast build, like I'm gonna try to just mostly use the cast on enemies, you're probably gonna take Boiling Blood most of the time, you know? Most builds are built around using your attack or your special, right? Maybe if you're going for like a big Zeus build with a lot of lightning damage, or maybe Ares for a lot of doom damage, maybe Abyssal Blood would be better. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, that is some big damage reduction there, that's for sure. But I'd say unless you're kind of cranking up some heat here, and you're not really using your attack and special mostly for your damage, I just go Boiling Blood most of the time here. All right, Infernal Soul versus Stygian Soul. This is kind of one that's like, if you want to have fun, you're going to go Stygian Soul. If you want to just have a pretty normal run that isn't dependent on chaos or some other weird things, you're going to go Infernal Soul. So Stygian Soul is really, you get that 1 cast and it auto regenerates every 3 seconds here. So unless you get some extra casts from either Chaos or Artemis's Legendary Boon, which is very difficult to get, or maybe just from some well items, it's really not going to work well, you know. If it's just built into a build that isn't focused around the cast, it doesn't matter that much, you know, it's not a big deal. So unless you're really focusing on a specific cast build, this choice isn't that meaningful either way, I'd say. Normally, though, you just throw Infernal Soul on 9 times out of 10 still. You know, it's really only if you really want to delve deep into Stygian would you actually utilize it. Deep Pockets versus Golden Touch. Deep Pockets, you just start with 100 extra obols. Golden Touch, you get 15% extra at the end of each biome. I never use it. I never use Golden Touch. Just never, ever, ever, basically. I can't think of any really great instances where you'd be like, this is going to be good this run. Unless you're doing some weird meme run for a lot of gold, you know, it just doesn't really make sense here. I'd say that 100 gold right out of the gate is pretty important, because that means when you get to your first shop in Tartarus, there's a good chance you can afford a boon if you start off with 100 extra gold. And getting that extra boon at the start of a run it's pretty nice. It's a big deal. All right, Thick Skin versus High Confidence. In case you don't know, High Confidence, you get 25% extra damage, and that is total damage, it would appear at least. Not just from your attack, not just from your special, but from everything. As long as you're above 80% health. I would not recommend this most of the time. You'll see some uses in speedruns, and that's about it, basically. This is sort of a speedrun tech, and not much else, I'd say. It just doesn't make sense to reduce your health in half at the start of a run, or a buff that is only going to be up occasionally. Yeah, you know, it's just not normally worth it for an average run. All right, Privileged Status versus Family Favors. This is one that a lot of people ask. which one do I take, you know? I'm going to say privilege status is what you're going to take the majority of the time, probably like 75% of the time. Unless you're going to purposefully go for an Artemis build with lots of crits. That means it's harder to get curses on your enemies. That's when you'd go family favorites. If you're focusing on Artemis, if you're focused on, say, Athena too, maybe even Poseidon, those are gods that are kind of harder to get their curses from. So that's when you might want to consider going family favorites. And just to be clear, family favorites, it does count Hermes as a god. It does not count Chaos as a god, you know. So on an average run, you'd probably get 4 or 5 gods, I'd say, naturally, without forcing additional ones. So you'd see, like, you know, 3 to 4 Olympians, and then you'd see Hermes, right? So you'd get like 20-25%, and that's full-on passive, so it's not bad. It's not a bad take. But it's usually pretty easy to get 2 curses on enemies, which is why I'd go privilege status. I think privilege status is also just a really interesting mirror upgrade that makes you think a little bit harder about your choices. Like, so when you get 1 curse going, you really got to think about, how am I gonna get a second curse? You know, oh, I picked up Athena. That means I need another boon from Athena to get a curse going. You know, her exposed boon applies a curse to enemies. Some clear ups here. Doom does count as a curse from Ares, but keep in mind, Doom does not last very long on enemies. Also, some things do not count as curses that you might think. Festive Fog from Dionysus does not count as a curse. The Mayhem effect from Gilgamesh aspect does not count as a curse. It's really only specifically the ones that are tied to gods, and they will specifically say curse also. Next up, we have Olympian Favor versus Dark Foresight. This is a recent change. Dark Foresight got increased to 20% with version 1.0 releasing. And I'm starting to think that Dark Foresight is the way. 20% increased chance to see what I would call gold-leafed doors. Gold leaf means, you know, that it's going to offer a boon, a hammer, gold, or a palm, basically. The other doors, which are like silver-leafed, I guess you could say, it's just darkness, keys, and nectars, basically. So those are more meta currencies. So Dark Foresight is good for when you just want a very strong run. You want a very strong build and run. You probably don't want to take this if you are still farming your meta currencies necessarily, and you'd probably just throw an Olympian Favor, honestly. But once you're past that point, I think Dark Foresight is a solid choice now. You know, so I would keep this on for myself as a default nowadays, basically. Next up, God's Pride versus God's Legacy. This is kind of a tough choice. You get increased epic rarity from boons, 20%, or you get increased duo and legendary chances by 10% at max ranks. It's tough. It's a tough choice. If you want to go for a specific duo boon or a specific legendary, you have to take God's Legacy. You know, if you decide, oh, I want to play Hunting Blades, you know, the duo boon between Artemis and Ares, you got to take God's Legacy. You know, you just have to, really. I mean, technically you can get those duo boons without it, but you just should. That's just what you should do, basically. If you're not going for a specific duo boons and you're not too concerned about them, I would keep on God's Pride as a default, just so you don't wind up with all common boons, basically. Those epic boons do make a really big difference most of the time, I'd say, okay? So this is, so far, a pretty standard mirror for what I normally run with nowadays, I think, okay? And lastly, and this is probably the most important one, I think, Fated Authority versus Fated Persuasion. And I know this is a tough choice for players just because these things cost a lot of darkness, right? This is where most of your darkness is going to go, so it's kind of hard to decide which one do I start pouring it into. I'm going to go out and say Fated Persuasion is going to be what you want. It is what I use 99 times out of 100. And the big reason for that is when I do runs, I usually specifically go for, like, I really want a strong attack, or I really want a strong special, or I really want a strong cast from this god or that god. So when I do that, that means when I leave the chamber for the first time and I get that first boon, I want to make sure it's the boon of that specific boon that I want. I want it to be attack, I want it to be the special, I want it to be the cast. And if I'm using Fated Authority, I can't really guarantee that. Technically, Persuasion doesn't guarantee it either, but I think just getting a very strong boon out of the gate is super important, you know? Fated Authority is good if you just want to get a lot of boons in general, I'd say. You know, if you're just looking to get tons of boons from gods. Maybe if you're trying to fill up the fated list, you know, get those prophecies, you just want to see more and more boons, you know, you might use fated authority, in which case you'd roll doors that have gold or health or palms on them and try to get boons instead, maybe. But honestly, fated persuasion is just too good, you know. If you enter a mini boss chamber and you know there's a chance to see a duo boon and you don't get it, guess what? You can roll for that. I just think it's very strong. So I know this is seems pretty simple and it's a little lopsided toward the red side of the mirror, but honestly, this is sort of what an average run for me might look like. You might see me swap this in and out on occasion, depending on which god I might be looking to see. You might see me swap this in and out, depending on if I want dual boons or not. But otherwise, this is pretty standard. This is a good mirror setup, honestly. All right, guys, that's it for me for today. I hope this helped you out. I'm going to try to make more guides, more informative videos that really explain some of the thought processes and just the decision-making out there in Hades, and maybe I can help out some people. Let me know if you thought this was good, and if you haven't, check out the stream. We are live, www.dampdad.com, most of the time. All right, guys, have a good day. I'll see you later. Thanks.